I still remember the exact tone of his voice when he said it. Not loud, not nervous, almost bored, like he'd said it 1,000 times before. "Stay here. I'll be right back." That sentence should mean nothing. It should be harmless. It should fade into the noise of memory like so many other small instructions people give each other every day. But for me, it became the last solid thing I could hold on to before everything started sliding out of control. When I think about that trip now, what scares me most isn't the place itself. It's how confident we were, how calm, how convinced we were that nothing truly bad could happen, because we had hired a guide, because he knew the land, because he smiled easily and spoke like someone who had survived worse things than us. I was wrong about almost everything. We were 4 in total. Me, 2 friends I'd known for years, and the guide. I won't say where exactly we were, because the location isn't the point. It was remote, isolated, the kind of place people go to feel small in a good way. Endless stretches of land, rough terrain, no signal, no noise except wind and insects, and the sound of your own breathing when you walk uphill. I had wanted this trip badly, more than I admitted. Life back home felt loud and artificial. Screens everywhere, notifications, deadlines that didn't mean anything once you stepped back and looked at them honestly. I wanted silence. I wanted discomfort that felt earned. I wanted to feel real again. The guide seemed perfect. He was older than us, lean, sun-weathered skin, eyes that scanned the horizon without effort. He didn't over-explain. He didn't try to impress us. That alone made me trust him more than I should have. The first 2 days went smoothly. Too smoothly, in hindsight. We walked long hours, stopped when he told us to stop, drank when he said to drink. He knew where water could be found, where shade lasted longer, where the ground looked stable but wasn't. I watched him closely. Not because I distrusted him, but because I admired the ease with which he moved. He belonged there in a way I never could. On the 3rd day, everything changed. It started small. A wrong turn, maybe. A path that looked familiar but wasn't. The sun felt harsher, higher, like it was pressing down instead of shining. We walked longer without stopping. The guide spoke less. I noticed it before the others did. The way he paused more often, scanning the distance. The way his jaw tightened when he thought we weren't looking. When I realized something was off, my first instinct was to ignore it. Nobody wants to be the anxious one, the weak link, the guy who questions the expert. That instinct almost got us all into something much worse. By late afternoon, we reached a narrow stretch between rocky outcrops. The ground dipped and rose in uneven waves, and the wind funneled through the gap in sharp bursts. The guide stopped abruptly. "Stay here," he said. "I'll check ahead." No explanation, no estimated time, just that. We nodded, all of us, like obedient students. At first it felt normal. Guides scout ahead. That's what they do. We sat down, drank water, joked quietly. I remember laughing at something stupid one of my friends said, and thinking how good it felt to laugh out there, away from everything. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The laughter faded. The wind picked up. I stood up and walked a few steps forward, trying to see where he'd gone. The terrain swallowed him completely. One moment he'd been there. The next he'd been absorbed by rock and shadow. 15 minutes. That's when the unease crept in. Not panic, just a subtle tightening in my chest. A question forming without words. 20 minutes. One of my friends asked if we should call out to him. Another said we shouldn't move. I stayed quiet, but inside, something was already shifting. A realization I didn't want to face yet. When I finally called his name, my voice sounded wrong, thin, like it didn't belong there. No answer. I called again, louder. Nothing. The place swallowed sound in a way that felt unnatural. The wind carried it off, tore it apart. We waited another 10 minutes, but by then the waiting itself had become unbearable. Every second stretched. Every small sound made my head snap up. That's when it hit me, clear and cold. We didn't know where we were. Not really. We had followed him the entire time, trusted his sense of direction, his judgment, his memory of the land. And now, the one person who connected us to safety had simply vanished. I won't pretend I handled it well. Fear doesn't arrive as a scream. It arrives as silence inside your head, a hollowing out. I remember thinking very calmly, if he doesn't come back, this place becomes something else. My friends started talking over each other. Suggestions, arguments. Should we follow him? Should we stay? Should we backtrack? Every option felt wrong. The sun was already dipping lower, stretching shadows across the rocks like long fingers. The temperature shifted subtly, the kind of change you don't notice until it's too late. I tried to think like him. What would the guide do? But I realized I didn't actually know him at all. I knew his voice, his walk, his confidence. But I didn't know how he thought when things went wrong, and that terrified me more than the silence. We decided to wait a little longer. It felt safer than moving blindly. I kept telling myself he'd reappear any second, annoyed that we'd been so tense, making a joke about a false alarm. That moment never came. Instead, the light faded faster than expected. The wind grew colder, and the landscape, which had felt vast and beautiful hours earlier, now felt hostile, watching, indifferent. I checked my watch again and again, as if time might suddenly reverse. When the sky started shifting colors, I knew we had crossed a line. Night out there wasn't something you eased into. It dropped, hard. We called his name one last time. Our voices echoed weakly, bouncing off stone and disappearing. That was when I felt the weight of the responsibility settle onto my shoulders. Not because I was the strongest or the smartest, but because someone had to decide something, and everyone else was frozen. I told them the truth, even though my voice shook. He's not coming back tonight. Saying it out loud made it real, final in a way that felt dangerous. We had supplies, but not enough for mistakes, not enough for wandering. We chose a spot that offered some shelter, close to where we'd been told to stay. It felt like honoring the last instruction we'd been given, even as it betrayed us. As darkness wrapped around us, my thoughts spiraled. Where did he go? Did he get lost? Did he fall? Did he find something and decide not to come back? That last question haunted me the most, because it suggested intention. I barely slept. Every sound snapped me awake. The wind scraping over rocks sounded like footsteps. Shadows shifted in ways that made my heart race. I remember staring up at the sky, more stars than I'd ever seen, and feeling incredibly small. Not in a poetic way, in a helpless way. Morning came slowly, painfully. The cold lingered longer than expected. My body felt stiff, my mouth dry. We searched at first light, carefully, calling his name, scanning the ground for signs, footprints, anything. There were marks, but they led nowhere. Broken patterns, trails that vanished into stone. The land erased him, and that's when I understood something I'd never fully accepted before. Out there, experience doesn't make you invincible. Confidence doesn't mean control, and sometimes the person you trust most can disappear without warning, leaving you to inherit the consequences. By midday, we had to make a decision that would define everything that came after. Stay and hope he returned, or move forward into territory we didn't understand, without the one person who had promised to lead us through it. I didn't know it yet, but that decision would change how I see people, promises, and silence forever. And the worst part? No matter what choice we made, part of me already knew something irreversible had happened the moment he said, "Stay here," and walked away. The moment after we agreed to move was heavier than the decision itself. Saying it out loud felt like crossing an invisible border. Up until then, there was still a version of reality where the guide could come walking back, annoyed, maybe embarrassed, but alive and in control. Once we chose to leave that spot, we were admitting that version was gone. I told myself it wasn't abandonment, it was survival. We gathered what we had, redistributed water, checked straps, tightened boots. Everyone moved slower now, more deliberate. No jokes, no casual chatter. Even our breathing sounded different, like we were afraid the land might hear us. I took the lead not because I wanted to, but because hesitation spreads fast. Fear multiplies when no one steps forward. As we walked, I tried to read the terrain the way I'd watched him do it. Slopes, wind direction, subtle color changes in the ground. It felt like trying to speak a language after hearing it for only a few days. Every so often, one of us would stop and look back, as if the guide might suddenly be standing there watching us leave. He never was. The sun climbed higher, and with it came a different kind of pressure. Heat pressed down, relentless. Sweat burned my eyes. My pack felt heavier with every step, even though nothing had changed. At one point, we found a narrow pass that looked promising. It opened into a wider area beyond, the kind of space that suggested movement, maybe even water. I hesitated. The guide had avoided this direction before. Or had he? That's the problem with memory under stress. It rewrites itself. We moved forward, hours blurred together. Our conversation shrank to short phrases. Water. Rest. Careful. Then we found something that stopped us cold. A piece of fabric. It was wedged between rocks, snagged like it had been pulled free. The color was unmistakable. It matched the guide's outer layer. I picked it up slowly. The material was torn, not cut, frayed at the edges. My stomach dropped. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say. In that moment, hope and fear fused into something worse, because finding evidence meant he had been there. But it also meant something had gone wrong. We followed the signs carefully, too carefully. Every step felt like an intrusion. The trail became harder to read. Marks faded. The land returned to its neutral indifference, as if daring us to accuse it of anything. Eventually, the signs stopped completely. That's when I felt the weight of something else settle in. Guilt. I kept replaying the moment he left. His voice, his posture. Was there something I should have noticed? A hesitation? A glance back? Some unspoken warning? I realized how easily we hand over responsibility when someone seems confident. How quickly we silence our own instincts, because it's easier to follow than to lead. We rested briefly in the shade of a rock formation. The silence there was thick. One of my friends asked quietly if we should turn back. I didn't answer right away. Turning back meant returning to a place that no longer felt safe. Moving forward meant committing to uncertainty. Both felt dangerous, but only one felt like progress. We moved on. The second night was worse than the first. Exhaustion stripped away the buffer fear had given us. Everything felt raw, every sound cut deeper. I barely slept again, and when I did, my dreams were fragmented, filled with half-formed images of footsteps and voices that stopped just out of reach. Sometime before dawn, I woke up with a sudden, overwhelming sense that we were being watched. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, almost indifferent way, like the land itself was aware of us, measuring how long we would last. Morning brought no relief. Water was running low, our movements slowed. Tempers flared briefly, then burned out just as fast. There wasn't enough energy left for anger. By late afternoon, we reached higher ground. From there, the view stretched endlessly. No obvious paths, no signs of life, just variations of the same harsh beauty in every direction. That's when doubt hit me hardest. What if we were wrong? What if the guide had returned to the original spot after we left? What if he had done exactly what he said, and we were the ones who broke the rule? The thought nearly broke me. I had to push it aside. Survival doesn't allow room for endless what-ifs. Only the next step matters. Near sunset, we saw something that didn't belong. A straight line. It cut across the land in a way nature rarely does. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A road. The surge of relief that hit me was almost painful. My legs felt weak. One of my friends laughed, then started crying without warning. We didn't rush. I forced us to move carefully. Too many people get hurt at the finish line. When we finally reached it, the ground beneath our feet changed, packed, familiar, human. I stood there longer than I needed to, just staring, letting the reality settle in. We were going to make it out. Help came faster after that. Not immediately, but faster than I'd expected. Questions were asked, details recorded, names written down. When they asked about the guide, my throat tightened. I told them everything, exactly as it happened. The words felt heavy, clumsy, like they couldn't fully capture the absence he left behind. Search efforts followed, carefully planned, thorough. They didn't find him. Not then, not later. I won't say what conclusions were drawn. Some questions were answered. Others were left open in a way that still bothers me. What stays with me isn't just the fear or the exhaustion. It's the shift that happened inside me. Before that trip, I believed competence was a shield. That experience equaled safety. That confidence was proof. Now I know better. I know how quickly certainty can vanish, how fragile leadership really is, how silence can mean many things, and none of them are comforting. Sometimes I replay that moment again. Him standing there, us sitting down, his voice calm and assured. Stay here. I wonder if he believed he'd be back, or if, on some level, he already knew something we didn't. Either way, that sentence followed me home. It changed how I listen to people, how I weigh instructions, how I trust. Because out there, when the person you rely on disappears, you don't just lose a guide. You lose the illusion that someone else is in control. And you're forced to face the truth that survival isn't about knowing the way. It's about deciding who you become when the way is gone. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know it wasn't easy to hear, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen until the end. If this story made you reflect or reminded you of how fragile certainty can be, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with someone who values stories that stay with you long after they end.